All right, so I am back. I am back. I am back. Something extremely strange just happened to my Ustream, to my live stream. Give me 1 second, family, to get my Hold on, am I even on the right screen? Hold on. Yeah, it says I am. Give me 1 second to get everything back up and running, family. Okay, let me retweet my. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so everybody who is listening, I had a lot of viewers. I was up at 130 viewers a second ago. And it's mighty strange how I was only 36 minutes into that stream. Okay, and all of a sudden, my computer I don't know if y'all heard what I was saying when it actually happened, because I don't even know if it was still recording at that point. But my computer just completely just died. It just straight up died out of nowhere. Not it didn't die, but the screen froze. All of my apps were frozen. I couldn't touch anything. If y'all have ever seen like what they call the blue stream of death or the blue screen of death, it was almost like that, but I could still see like the pictures and the images on my computer screen. Real weird. Okay, extremely strange. All right, so if anybody, and it's mighty funny, like the stuff that I'm talking about right now with Mario Franco in Brazil, and this situation in Austin, and also the situation in Kansas, which I was in the middle of that story. It's mighty strange how I'm talking about this stuff that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Then all of a sudden, my computer starts acting real haywire. All right, so give me 1 second to get everything up and running again. I'm checking to make sure everything is still streaming properly, so the stream looks good. All right, so the stream looks good. Yes, I was definitely just attacked. Give me 1 second. My computer was definitely just attacked. So give me 1 second. I have to pull up the articles that I had because I had to restart my computer. So I don't even have. I have all of my articles uh, already up and running when I start a new stream. So that way I don't have to pull up new articles, obviously. But since I had to shut my computer down because trolls want to attack my computer, I have to pull everything back up again. So I hope no automatic. Y'all, I keep mentioning this in a lot of my live streams. I can't stand these autoplay ads that play on these pages. Sometimes I wish people would stop putting that crap on their web pages. That mess is really annoying. So if y'all hear just like some commercial, it sounds like some commercial. It's probably from some ad that's playing on a page I have up. But give me 1 second as I pull these stories up, and then I will start where I left off. Yeah, we definitely gonna keep this moving. Okay, so that's good. And Tennessee. I'm almost done, family. I'm just pulling my articles back up. All right. All right, so I don't remember because I wasn't expecting that little attack on my computer. I don't really remember what I was saying a second ago, so I'm just gonna continue where I left off in this article on Atlanta Black Star about because I remember I was talking about what was going on in Austin, and I was relating it to this story in Kansas about these four white supremacists. One of them an informant, and they didn't know that, who were planning on bombing, who's setting off car bombs in front of a mosque to kill Somali Muslims. Okay, I was talking about this story. It's on Atlanta Black Star now. So let me just double check everything else just to make sure everything else is good. Okay, so that looks straight. All right, so let me just continue. Man, like that threw off my energy, man. That really f with my energy. But I'm just going to push through it though. Cuz now I have two separate streams instead of having one stream. I have two. But anyway, jury selection begins. Okay, I read that already. Hold on one second. Where did I leave off? See, that mess has me all thrown off now. Do, 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 do. Prosecutors have said that a militia member tipped off federal authorities after becoming alarmed by the escalating talk of violence and later agreed to wear a wire as a paid informant. The government's case features months of profanity-laced recordings in which militia members discuss plans and refer to the Somalis as, quote, cockroaches. Okay, so these were white supremacists doing white supremacist things, calling the black Somalis who they were planning on attacking, calling them cockroaches and whatnot. They're not cockroaches because they want to kill innocent people. That's not something cockroaches do. You know, they're upstanding Americans, but you know it's the cockroaches that they're killing. That's their logic. That's the illogic nature of white supremacy. According to prosecutors, Stein was recorded discussing the type of fuel and fertilizer bomb that Timothy McVeigh used in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. So this wasn't something small that they were planning. They were planning a huge terrorist attack. Okay, and the Oklahoma City bombing killed 168 people. But Stein, one of the culprits, was arrested when he delivered 300 pounds of fertilizer to undercover FBI agents to make explosives. Okay? So they're pleading not guilty. In the last video, before my computer started acting real funny, I was talking about the lack of terrorism charges that these men are facing. You know, which I said before, like, this is a form of protection. This is a form of because if you start labeling this stuff as terrorism, it means the politicians have to do something about it. It means the politicians have to do something about white supremacy, and they don't want to do anything about white supremacy. They want to protect white supremacy under free speech. That's what they want to do. Okay, and you can't do that if you label it as terrorism, as a form of direct domestic terrorism. Then you can't say, oh, it's just a free speech issue anymore. That excuse becomes that excuse is thrown out of the window at that point. All right, so just be mindful. Be on the lookout for these white supremacists, and be mindful that regardless of what happens in Austin, Texas, whether it's a white supremacists who are behind it or not, just be mindful that the hate crimes are skyrocketing under Trump. Okay, you have these domestic terrorists who are attempting to wage, all types of war on black and brown people in this country. And you just have a lot of people in this country who don't want to take this seriously, who want to act like these are isolated incidents, who want to act like these people aren't being inspired by the hate speech and the hate rhetoric of white supremacy. Okay, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. It's already causing problems, some serious problems, and it's already getting people killed. Okay, this willful ignorance has to stop. There's a lot of willful ignorance around white supremacy and the threat that it poses to democracy and the threat that it poses to people of color and even white people in this country. Because white people are getting caught in the crossfire now. Because even if you look at Parkland, Florida, it was a white supremacist who was behind that. They like to play that. That's again, even if you look at Parkland, they want to play down this dude's white supremacy. Okay, it came out that he was associated with a white supremacist militia in Florida, and then they had to come out and distance themselves from the killer. Okay, after they came out and was bragging about it, then they had to come out and distance themselves from it. Nobody's bringing this up in the media. Okay, and I would put money on the fact that nothing's being done about it legally against them, because I haven't read anything stating that. And you had photos of him on Instagram, the killer, of Parkland, the Parkland students, and on Instagram with his little red "Make America Great Again" hat. Stop being willfully ignorant, and stop thinking that rhetoric isn't inspiring these people to commit acts of violence and acts of domestic terrorism. There's a lot of willful ignorance right now in this country. A lot of it. Okay, but I just wanted to bring up that story. The story has been messed up kind of because of what happened to my computer. So the story is now across several videos, or at least a couple different videos. But yeah, so we are going to press forward and continue. So the next story I want to talk about is this Cambridge Analytica story and why it's important. Okay. Now, Cambridge Analytica, this has come up several times already in the past. This isn't the first time this right-wing company has come up in the news, but I was reading this breaking story from The Guardian. Okay, The Guardian is, I like The Guardian. They are, a lot of times they're ahead of the corporate media here in America. A lot of breaking stories. The Guardian breaks a lot of stuff that the U.S. media is either slow to break or they don't break it at all. Okay, so I go to The Guardian a lot because they have a lot of the new stuff that comes out. But The Guardian has this whistleblower, and they're calling it the Cambridge Analytica files. And this whistleblower, this data scientist, is quoted as saying, "I made Steve Bannon's psychological warfare tool." Okay, so first and foremost, I want to get this pointed out clear and present for everybody. This is a form. This is not just ads, because you will have people who will try to narrow this down. People who want to play this story down and try to say that it's not real relevant, and it's, the people who want to make excuses for it, and going back to what I was saying a second ago about willful ignorance. People who want to be willfully ignorant about this. Okay, you're going to have a lot of people who say, well, it's just some ads on Facebook, yada, yada, yada. No, this was a form of psychological warfare. Okay, this was something that they use in foreign countries, okay, to attack elections in foreign countries. And actually, this article actually shows from The Guardian, the Cambridge Analytica files actually shows that similar tools were used in over 200 developing nations around the world. Okay, so this wasn't even just used in the United States. This was used in the Brexit election in the United Kingdom. Okay, so this was a right-wing. I'm not going to read the whole article because, quite frankly, it's too long, and the story is important because, well, I already read that. I was reading something I read a second ago. Yeah, so I'm not going to read the whole article, okay? But I implore people to read the article themselves, and I was tweeting the article last night, and I want to pull up a few of the screen caps. The important screen caps of this story. Okay, so by the time Steve Bannon had become Trump's chief strategist, Cambridge Analytica's parent company, SCL, had won contracts with the U.S. State Department and was pitching to the Pentagon And Wiley, who was the data scientist who's blowing the whistle, was genuinely freaked out. He said, "quote It's insane." He told me one night the company has created psychological profiles of 230 million Americans, and now they want to work with the Pentagon. It's like Nixon on steroids. Okay, this is very dangerous because people in the media, the corporate media, would have you believe that the only thing we need to be focused on is Russia. Okay, and even though they are covering this Cambridge Analytica story, there's a lot of stuff that they're not even mentioning from this Guardian article that I think is extremely important. Okay, there's a lot of information that's just being left out and glossed over. Okay, um, this is deeper than just ads on Facebook. First of all, they violated Facebook terms of service, which is why Facebook banned them. But Facebook was very slow in stopping this. The Facebook just banned them recently. Okay, they've known about this for a long time now. So if Facebook, I'm telling people now, like I have a Facebook group that I promote sometimes, but I really don't do a lot on Facebook, and it's because of stuff like this. Now, now it's not to say that this can't happen on Twitter. It definitely can. Okay, but we have to be mindful that you have these white supremacists and you have these alt-right types. Okay, who are using military tactics against you. Okay, this was a form of information warfare, and that needs to be harped on. Okay, because we're not just talking about ads; we're talking about deliberate disinformation. Okay, a form of mind control in many ways, if you will. That's what we're talking about here. So let me read another excerpt from the article to you. Okay, Wiley oversaw what may have been the first critical breach when he was 24 while studying for a PhD in fashion trend forecasting. He came up on a plan to harvest the Facebook profiles of millions of people in the United States and to use their private and personal information to create sophisticated psychological and political profiles, and then target them with political ads designed to work on their particular psychological makeup. He says, quote, "We broke Facebook." Okay, and he did it on behalf of his new boss, Steve Bannon. It is fair to say, and then the investigators asked him, quote, "Is it fair to say you hacked Facebook?" And then he hesitated and said, "I'll point out that I assumed it was entirely legal and above board." So basically, they hacked Facebook. And they got information that they really shouldn't have had access to. Okay? This is a crazy story. Okay, and here's another excerpt. "And through it all, Wiley and I, plus a handful of editors in a small international group of academics and researchers, have known that at least since 2014, that certainly wasn't the case because Wiley has the paper trail, and it's referring to something else from earlier in the article that I didn't highlight, where they're denying they're denying certain things. Cambridge Analytica, they're making all sorts of denials and things like that, and it's basically saying that no, this whistleblower has receipts. Okay, he has receipts, he has invoices, he has emails, he has legal letters, he has records that have shown that show that how between June and August of 2014, the profiles of more than 50 million Facebook users have been harvested. Most damning of all, he had a letter from Facebook's own lawyers admitting that Cambridge Analytica had acquired the data illegitimately. So Facebook has known about this since 2014. Going public involves an enormous amount of risk. Wiley is breaking a non-disclosure agreement and risks being sued. He is breaking the confidence of Steve Bannon and Robert Mercer. So who is Robert Mercer? Robert Mercer, okay, let me pull up pull up some data. Robert Mercer is a far-right financier of the alt-right. He's a billionaire, and this is why, in this fight against white supremacy, it's not a fair fight. Okay, because we have to understand white supremacists and white supremacist groups receive billions of dollars in funding on a yearly basis from people like the Mercers, from people like the Koch brothers. They get all kinds of money. It is not a fair fight. Okay, they are waging psychological warfare and an information war, deliberately using bots. Okay, they're deliberately manipulating the talking points. This is an ideological war. Okay, it's not, and liberals get on this thing, and liberals and progressives get on this thing where they like to say, okay, well, we can debate them in the public space of ideas, in the marketplace of ideas. That's not what these people are trying to do. They don't care about the damn marketplace of ideas. They're spreading disinformation. They're spreading propaganda, deliberately spreading propaganda. Okay, and it's these stories like it's the Cambridge Analytica, which was a U.S. company, not a Russian company, a U.S. company funded by a U.S. Right-wing billionaire. Okay, it's U.S. companies and it's U.S. Groups. Like when you look at Kris Kobach, and I'm gonna talk about Kobach in a second. It's Americans who played the biggest role in illegitimately getting Trump elected in 2016. Okay, yes, Trump might be guilty of some shady business deals with Russians. He definitely might be guilty of money laundering and or his foundation or whoever around him. There might be some money laundering going on and some illegal activity in that sense. And that might even be conspiracy charges that might be coming down the pipe. Okay, but I'm telling you guys this right now. They will not prove that Russia had anything to do with the outcome of the 2016 election. That part of the Russia story is a diversion. Okay, because what they don't want to talk about is they don't want to talk about the U.S. people, the Americans, okay, who devise these voter suppression schemes like Kris Kobach and these Americans like Bannon and Mercer and Cambridge Analytica, okay, who hacked Facebook and illegally gained, or this is according to the article. Okay, this is according to what's being insinuated in the Guardian article, who illegitimately got access to the data of millions of people to manipulate the public, to launch a major PSYOP campaign against the American people. All right? So while they're talking about Russians, understand that it's Americans. It's Americans waging war against other Americans that led to Donald Trump. Donald Trump should not be president of the United States right now. Donald Trump was all but installed. Okay, and I use that word very loosely. Okay, because people did vote for him. Okay, but understand that in order to get Trump in office, they had to suppress the votes of millions of people. They had to devise these schemes, these psychological operation schemes on social media. Okay, they had to do all of this stuff to get Trump in office. And this is a plot that had been hatched. People were planning this at least since 2014. So they were planning this for a while. Okay. So that's all I wanted to primarily say about that story. Because like I said, I'm not going to read the article verbatim. Let me just read this one last highlighted quote. In the history of bad ideas, this turned out to be one of the worst. The job was research director across the SCL Group, a private contractor that has both defense and elections operations. Its defense arm was a contractor to the UK's Ministry of Defense and the US DoD, among others. Its expertise was in psychological operations or PSYOPs. So when I say that, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. You literally had a group that was part of Cambridge Analytica, okay, who their expertise was PSYOPs. Their expertise was waging psychological war on unsuspecting groups of people. changing people's minds not through persuasion, not through this BS notion of the marketplace of ideas that a lot of liberals and progressives like to get on, not through persuasion, but through, quote, informational dominance, end quote, a set of techniques that include rumor, disinformation, and fake news. SCL Elections had used a similar suite of tools in more than 200 elections across the world, mostly in underdeveloped democracies that Wiley, the whistleblower, would come to realize were unequipped to defend themselves. So this has, understand the impact of this. This goes beyond this psyop itself, right? It goes beyond the psyop itself. Okay, because Trump is in office now, think about all the damage that's been done. Okay, the families that have been torn apart, the lives that have been lost, and may be lost in the future because of this little scheme and this little scam that they had going on. This is deeply, deeply, deeply problematic. All right, so man, this is bad news, and nothing is being done about it. Absolutely nothing is being done about it right now. All right, so they're just letting these white supremacists run ruckshot, and they're not doing anything to stop it. You see this in these stories about these bombings. You see that in the stories about voter suppression. You see this in stories about this Cambridge Analytica story. They're letting these white supremacists run ruckshot right now. And they're letting them get away with a lot of stuff they would not let other groups of people get away with. But let me just continue. All right, man. I'm liking the feedback I'm getting right now. I'm liking the love I'm getting right now. Shout out to the room. I'm glad everybody is listening. But yeah, definitely read that Cambridge Analytica story in full. I'm not going to do it, but I just wanted to break down why people are talking about it, why it's an important story. So the last two stories I want to touch on is a story about Kris Kobach, and I'm repeating this because my first stream was something happened to my computer, something weird. I'm not going to say that I was hacked because I don't know that, but it was just very weird. So the last two stories I want to touch on is this story about Kris Kobach and how Tennessee has fined residents nearly $100,000 for braiding hair without licenses. All right, criminalizing blackness, basically. So let me pull up that Kobach story. So this is from the New York Times. All right, the story came out yesterday. It says Kris Kobach's voting sham gets exposed in court. Okay, well, people don't like talking about voter suppression because voter suppression conflicts with a lot of narratives. There's a particular narrative I've noticed that people like to tell about the 2016 election. People like to say it was economics. People like Trump's pseudo populism. People like to say that it was Hillary Clinton and identity politics. I'm telling y'all now, none of that had anything to do with why Trump won. Okay, that's all a deflection away from voter suppression. Voter suppression, and maybe even to an extent, this Cambridge Analytica story and this psychological operation that was ran on the American people by the alt-right, basically. That probably had something to do with it too, but it was definitely voter suppression on top of everything else. So what's going on with Kobach? So this is from the article, the modern American crusade against voter fraud has always been propelled by faith. That is an insistent belief in things unseen. Things like voters who show up at the polls pretending to be someone else, or who non-citizens try to register and vote illegally. Okay, so it's basically saying that the belief in voter suppression is like a religion for a lot of people, and that's true. Okay, so fraud like this is so rare to be almost unmeasurable, and yet its specter has led to dozens of strict new laws around the country, passed in the name of electoral integrity, The laws, which usually require voters to present photo IDs at the polls or provide proof of citizenship to register, make voting harder, if not impossible, for tens of thousands of people. Disproportionately minorities, which is a word that I hate, but disproportionately minorities and others who tend to vote Democratic. Okay, I said on Twitter that voter ID is the new black codes. Anybody who knows the history of voter suppression knows what I'm talking about. They know what the black codes were. The voter ID is the new black codes. It's the new grandfather clause. It is the new literacy test. Okay, it is a scheme that they use to suppress the vote of certain groups of people. And understand this, voter ID and other forms of voter suppression, it's not about nullifying the vote of everybody. So they're not trying to attack all black people's right to vote, because they know that most black people have IDs on them. So a lot of black people aren't affected by voter ID laws because, you have IDs on you, so it's not really an issue. Okay, they know, though, that there's a certain percentage of the black and brown community, because of poverty a lot of times, and because they just don't have a way of getting around, they know that there's a certain percentage of black and brown people who don't have IDs. So they know when they pass these voter ID laws that they will impact the votes of a tiny percent. Even in a lot of these states, look at the swing states that Trump won. Okay, he won by small percentage points. He wasn't winning these swing states by 10 points or even 5 points a lot of times. All they need to do is suppress the vote from, I'd say, 2 to 4% of the population. If they can get 2 to 4% of the population in a swing state, you can swing that state for the Republicans. Okay, so people need to get out of this mentality that voter suppression isn't swinging elections. Okay, people who believe that, you clearly aren't reading the information that's out there. Okay, there's a reason that people are talking about voter suppression as much as they are. Okay, I've seen a lot of stories about this, and this is something the media refuses to talk about. But this is why I'm here. This is why I have Black and Intellectual. This is why I talk so much about the need for independent black media. All right? This is why I talk about that. Because of stories like this. So, continuing. The high priest of this faith-based movement is Kris Kobach. They're talking about the voter fraud movement. They called him the high priest of the movement. Kris Kobach, the Kansas Secretary of State and gubernatorial candidate. God, I hope he doesn't become governor. Please, Kansas. I know, with a MFer like Kobach in your state, as Secretary of State, I know that there's a lot of voter suppression in Kansas. I know there is. And so I know that might impact on who wins or who becomes governor. But please, everybody has to get out there and vote. Do not let this man become governor. Okay. And Kobach has been preaching his gospel of deception to Republican lawmakers for years. He has won plenty of converts. Okay. Even though he has failed to identify more than a tiny handful of possible cases of fraud. In his 8 years as Secretary of State, he has secured a total of 9 convictions. 9 in 8 years. That's less than 1 a year. Only one of which was for illegal voting by a non-citizen. Most were for double voting by older Republican men. They leave that out. They like to leave that out. Okay, most of the cases of voter fraud that they are finding are from Republican men. Not Democrats, not black people, not Hispanics, Republicans. It reminds me a lot of how they like to lie about people who kill cops, right? You get groups like white supremacist groups like Blue Lives Matter, okay, who try to say things like, yeah, well, you're just hating the cops. There's a war on cops, yada, yada, yada. They completely ignore the fact that a lot of these people who are killing cops are actually white people. They completely gloss over that. Okay, they completely ignore that. It's the same mentality. It's the same mentality here. Okay? This selective understanding of what's actually going on. because what it really is they have an ulterior motive. They have an agenda that they're hiding behind closed doors, and they use certain arguments to hide their agenda. Okay, that's Republicanism 101. For the past 2 weeks, however, Mr. Kobach has been forced to make his case in a far more rigorous setting, the fact-finding process of a federal trial. So a lot of the tactics that he uses, to get Republican lawmakers to sign on to these things like cross-check, and that's another problem I have. I like that the mainstream, print media, in the case of the New York Times, I like that they talk about Kobach. I don't like how every time they talk about Kobach, they completely ignore cross-check. Cross-check, in my opinion, is why Trump is in office right now. Cross-check there is no bigger scandal that put Trump in office than cross-check. Not Russia, not Cambridge Analytica, and I think Cambridge Analytica had a role to play, okay, because they were waging a psychological operation on the public. Okay, it was a mind control operation that they were waging on the public. But even that, I don't necessarily think that flipped votes. Okay, there is no bigger scandal of the 2016 election than voter suppression, specifically cross-check. Okay, so a lot of these articles will bring up Kobach and they won't bring up cross-check because that's the real reason. That's the thing that everybody wants to hide. Okay, so he's having trouble. Kobach is having trouble making his argument in court. In a Kansas City courtroom, Mr. Kobach and his fellow true believers have struggled to defend a 2013 state law that requires prospective voters to prove their citizenship before they can register. Okay? It has not gone well for Mr. Kobach. The lawsuit brought by the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, on behalf of Kansas residents who were blocked from voting under the new law, contends that the legislation violates federal law, which requires only that the prospective voters attest to their citizenship under penalty of perjury. Meanwhile, it disenfranchised tens of thousands of Kansans who were disproportionately younger voters or voters with no party affiliation. Okay? So let me see. And how many non-citizens did the law stop from voting? Squint really hard. One would think that after all these years, Mr. Kobach would have something to show for his dogged efforts. Yet, according to his own witnesses, Kansas, which has 1.8 million registered voters, has identified 129 non-citizens, it says registered or tried to register, since 2000. 129 since 2000. Of those 129, 11 actually voted. And it's not clear how many of these cases represent intentional fraud as opposed to an honest mistake or clerical errors. But Mr. Kobach, is convicted, or not convicted. That's a Freudian slip. I want him to be convicted of something, but Mr. Kobach is convinced, calling these findings, quote, the tip of the iceberg. If so, the iceberg is melting fast. He's making this crap up. Okay, voter fraud is a lie. It is a lie that has been proven by many different people, many different sources. Okay, there's no voter fraud on a mass scale. And like even this New York Times article points out, half the time you don't even know, is this just a clerical error, or was this just like an honest mistake where people just didn't know what they were doing? You can't even assume. But this is 11 people since 2000 who actually voted illegally. Mr. Kobach's game may work with partisan lawmakers, but not with federal judges. At the beginning of the trial, Mr. Kobach, who was representing himself, tried to introduce what he said were new data on the number of Kansans whose voter registrations were suspended for lacking proof of citizenship. Judge Julie Robinson of Federal District Court said no, reminding him that the deadline for introducing pretrial evidence had passed the night before, and she said, quote, "We're not going to have a trial by ambush here." Okay, so he's trying to present new evidence that wasn't screened and that you know past the deadline. So this dude is just all over the place. Okay, so that is let me see. Let's see if there's anything important in this article. Hold on one second, family. Okay, yeah, this is important. And this is another article a few paragraphs down. Remember also that just days after the 2016 election, Mr. Kobach scored a meeting with President-elect Donald Trump in which he urged the passage of a nationwide proof of citizenship requirement. A few months later, Mr. Trump appointed Mr. Kobach. What's up with this Mr. shit? But anyway, Mr. Trump appointed Mr. Kobach to lead his so-called Election Integrity Commission, that little silly election commission. In January, after months of futility and infighting, the commission folded. And so they're talking about this past January in 2018. Having made no findings and issued no recommendations. Okay, and no surprise here, there's virtually nothing to find. There has been no epidemic of non-citizens voting, despite Mr. Trump's baseless claim, which is endorsed by Kobach, that he lost the popular vote only because of millions of illegal voters. Okay? So this makes me think, and I don't have evidence for this, and I don't know that anybody has evidence for this. This makes me think that Trump was aware of the cross-check scheme. This makes me aware of, and if Trump wasn't aware of cross-check, then somebody around him definitely was. I have no doubt about that. He was way too quick to bring Kobach on board. And Kobach is the architect of cross-check. All right, so that's real strange to me. That's not, when I see stuff like that, that's not an accident. All right. So let's continue. That's all I primarily wanted to say about that story. That's the most important things about that story. Okay, it looks like I have some trolls in the room. Whenever it's funny. Whenever you start actually having some success and gaining traction, which I am, Black Intellectual is growing. I say that numerous times, especially recently. Black Intellectual is growing, the live stream is growing. People are paying attention to some of the stuff that I'm saying. And it feels beautiful getting support from people. I love just breaking bread with people of like mind. But you also attract these knuckle draggers. You know what I'm saying? Like you attract people that you don't want to attract a lot of times. But I'll continue with my story. So that was the Kobach story. So the last story I want to talk about is this crazy story in Tennessee, where residents have been fined nearly $100,000 for braiding hair without licenses. This story, I wasn't going to talk about this at first, but I was like, you know what? I gotta mention this at least. Okay, and then the article isn't long, so it's going to be a real quick article. This is from Forbes.com. Tennessee has fined residents nearly $100,000 just for braiding hair. Okay, that's crazy. Just think about that for a second. Something that is just completely harmless. Something that doesn't hurt anybody. Okay, people are being fined for braiding hair. Where do you see that happening? Like, oh my God, what is going on in this country? All right, so ever since she was a little girl, Ratu Diop, that sounds African, has been braiding hair. And for almost 2 decades, Fatou, however you pronounce her name, has turned that tradition into a vocation by working professionally as a licensed natural hairstylist in Tennessee. She says, quote, "I never did any job but hair braiding my entire life. I cannot recall a time when I did not know how." Okay, but in recent years, that was an end quote. But in recent years, Tennessee has forced Fatou to pay a staggering $16,000 in fines simply because she employed workers who did not have a government license to braid hair. Why the hell do you need a license to braid hair? Why? You know why they pass these laws? Like, because you're gonna get some ignorant people who are like, well, it's a law. You gotta follow the law. You have to follow the law. If they say you have to get a license to braid hair, you have to get a license to braid hair. And they're in the right. They can charge her if they want to because it's the law. The reason why they pass these laws that target people of color, which this does, okay? They pass these laws, number one, to make it harder for people to go into business for themselves. Okay, and as you'll read later on, as I'm about to read in a second, you'll see how they make it harder for people to do this. But then too, on top of that, when people do violate the law, it's a way of draining people of their money. So this is a cash grab more than anything else. You shouldn't need a license to braid damn hair. That's ridiculous. But I'll continue. Nor is she alone. After examining meeting minutes and disciplinary actions for the Tennessee Board of Cosmetology and Barber Examiners, the Institute for Justice has identified nearly $100,000 in fines leveled against dozens of braiders and more than 30 different natural hair shops and salons since 2009. All of those violations were for unlicensed braiding. None were triggered by any health or sanitation violation. Let me repeat that. All of those violations were for unlicensed braiding. None were triggered by any health or sanitation violation. So they passed these laws under the guise that, we need to make sure people are being, sanitary. We're making sure this is a health issue. You know what I'm saying? That's the cover they like to use. But really, it's just about taking money from people at the end of the day. Typically, the board will issue a $1,000 civil penalty for every instance of, quote, performing natural hair care services for clients without a license, it encounters. In addition to finding braiders who work out of their homes or unlicensed salons. So they're going after people who are just braiding hair in their homes. The board has targeted licensed shops like Fatale's. Okay? For Fatale, those heavy fines have been, quote, very stressful. Under a payment plan for her most recent violations, she has to pay over $830 a month to the state, a burdensome expense she struggled to cover, on top of providing for her 2 children, dealing with her divorce, and sending remittances to support her family back in Senegal. So yeah, she is from Africa. I thought she was. Okay? Driven by those first-hand experiences, Fatale has become of the most... whoever wrote this didn't write it right, but it says Fatale has become of the most outspoken voices for reform. It should say one of the most. Together with the Institute for Justice and the Beacon Center, Fatale has testified in favor of a bill that would eliminate the state's license for natural hairstylists and the board's basis for finding braiders. We can create more, and then she says, quote, we can create more employment if this bill passes. But in Tennessee, only, quote, licensed natural hairstylists may earn a living by braiding, twisting, wrapping, weaving, extending, or locking hair. Check this out, obtaining that license can be quite an ordeal. This is what I was saying a second ago, how they don't make it easy for people. It's not like you need to go pay this little $20 fee to get a license. Like, no, braiders must complete at least 300 hours of coursework. Why do you need coursework to do shit that you learn independently? Which often means sacrificing the equivalent of working, almost 2 months full time. So they have to set aside 2 months worth of time to learn to go to do this training. So they're not bringing in employment across the entire state. Only 3 schools offer those courses, charging anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 for tuition. Mind you, it's mostly poorer, or at least more poorer than your average white family. It's mostly black people who don't have a lot of money who they're forcing to pay these fees, these really overpriced fees, $300 of coursework in only 3 locations across the entire state of Tennessee. Okay, so they've set it up. They set it up to basically criminalize the process, because they're setting it up to where, of course, you're going to have a lot of people who don't do this because it's stupid, it's ridiculous, it's a stupid law. Okay, it's a hurdle. It's a very high hurdle that they're putting in front of people, specifically so that a lot of people don't jump that hurdle, so they can start finding people. That's their little hustle. That's the hustle they have going on. So, that's the last story I wanted to cover. We had a little bit of a hiccup, but I'm still kind of ending around the time that I thought I wanted to end. I've gone on for an hour and a half, so I didn't hit 2 hours like I thought I would. And that's mostly because I didn't really break down the Cambridge Analytica story, which is why I did that, because I knew it would add another 30, 40, 50 minutes to the stream. And I just don't feel like going over it that deep, to be perfectly honest with you. So episode 20 is in the bag, or in the books. I will be back on Wednesday, same time, 12 or 12:30, give or take. Wednesday and Friday, I do my stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 12 or 12:30 p.m. Follow me at _Black Intellect on Twitter. Follow me at Black and Intellectual on YouTube. And follow my blog and join my mailing list on my blog at www.blackandintellectual.com.